The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Yourself? Well, welcome, Master Gardener volunteers, to our 2013 Idaho Master Gardener School Garden Mentor Training. This is our first webinar that we've ever done just by ourselves, so we hope that everything is going to go smoothly. We really appreciate you attending today. During this webinar, you are going to be muted. If you have questions, please type them into the box that you see on the right hand of your screen, and we will try to get to them as they come through. We could also have some time for questions after the presentations. Those of you that are not going to be able to attend the webinar live today, we will be recording this and posting it for you to view later. So if you don't get everything the first time, you may choose to relive this experience again. I'm joined today by Nancy Shelstad, and we are going to be presenting you with some of the information that you need to get going as a school garden mentor. Remember, this is a pilot program. All of these things are new that we're doing, and we're really looking to all of you volunteers to help us mold and shape the program and make it successful. So what are we going to talk about today? So number one, we're going to introduce you to the Idaho School Garden Mentor Program. Some of you have been working with youth in schools for quite some time. This is not new to you, but others are new to this experience, and so we want to make sure everybody is on the same page. We'll talk a little bit about the fundamentals of working with youth in extension and 4-H programs, and that's where Nancy Shelstad, our 4-H and youth development educator here in Canyon County, is going to share some really important insights with you, and we're even going to watch a short video. And we're going to follow up with just some ideas for helping your school gardens grow and be most successful. Those of you who are in this program now were selected because of your expertise and your interest, so I'm really looking forward to this section of it. So just a little bit about me. A few of you on this webinar and in this program are my very own Master Gardeners, which I'm very excited about. But one of the things that really excites me about this program is that I get to work with Master Gardeners from other parts of the state who I've not had the pleasure of meeting. So I'm a horticulture educator with the University of Idaho Extension, and I'm located in Canyon County in beautiful downtown Caldwell. I have a bachelor's degree in agriculture education, and so school gardens are very, very interesting to me. It was one of the first things that got my interest and made me want to pursue agriculture education. I also have a master's degree in horticulture, and while I was going to school at the U of I helped manage the student-run organic teaching farm. So a college farm is a little bit different than, say, an elementary school garden, but in many ways there are a lot of similarities. So I do understand some of the challenges that we're going to face and also some of the wonderful possibilities and opportunities. So one of the other reasons that I've been involved in this project is that I've been a member of the Idaho Farm to School Advisory Board for about 2 years. And through that time, we've discovered that school gardens are a very important part of the Idaho Farm to School movement, and that education for the teachers and the students involved in that is really key to the success of those gardens. And we'll talk a little bit about why Extension fits into that so well, but I think some of you probably already know. And here's a picture of me out in the field picking beans, and it's a beautiful day here today in Canyon County. It would be a nice day to be outside, though the beans wouldn't quite be ready to pick yet. They're just coming up in our gardens. And now Nancy Shelstad, who's going to give the presentation in a little bit, I'm going to let her introduce herself when it's her time to speak. So let's get started. Why school gardens? You know, I could go off of just what each of you put in your applications about why you wanted to participate in this project as some of the reasons for school gardens. But if we looked purely at research, and you know, at the University of Idaho, we like to go with research-based information, we have study after study that asserts that garden-based education, especially what includes hands-on and outdoor education, it actually increases academic achievement. And not only in the areas of science, technology, and math, but also in the social sciences as well, which is really interesting. Garden-based education has also resulted in higher test scores and often in an increased interest in those scientific subjects. It also, believe it or not, reduces classroom management and discipline problems. The garden is a great place to learn to get along with each other, to take turns, and to solve problems, which actually then can create less problems in the classroom. So we've found this definitely to be true in the youth activities that we've presented throughout the years through 4-H and Junior Master Gardener. For example, some of our day camps have run 1 or 2 days, sometimes several hours, and we find that kids really do engage with the subject matter and become very interested in what they're doing and really enjoy the hands-on elements of school garden learning. So when we look at the other side and why school gardens are important to the USDA, which is the agency that's provided the funding for these school gardens, they have found out that garden-based nutrition education and children participating in school gardens has actually significantly increased children's consumption of fresh fruits and vegetables. When they get to try the foods, when they have a hand in growing the foods and harvesting them, they are much more likely to try those foods, consume them, decide that they like them, and to continue to consume them outside of school. And this is very, very important to USDA and to childhood nutrition programs because childhood obesity is a major problem in our society. And anything we can do to lessen its impact is going to be important. So school gardening is much more than just having fun, though that's a really big part of it too. And this is something else that we found through our youth activities as well. Here we were doing a taste testing at a summer day camp last year, and I've asked people when I've showed this picture before to pick what do you think was the kids' favorite vegetable to try raw. I'll give you a second to think about that. So believe it or not, it was the raw beets. Was #1 hands down the kids' favorite, and they kept coming back for more, and we had to slice into that other one that you see there on the table. So we know that this really has an impact on kids' eating habits and their desire to try new foods. So that brings us to why U of I Extension is now going to be involved in a more significant role in school gardening. Well, and that's for several reasons. #1, we have the expertise. We have faculty and staff and program coordinators that have been trained in horticulture and youth development, and really we have all the pieces to put this together. We also have the curriculum. I'll be showing you in a little while some of the different curriculum options available to you if you decide to participate in some of the instruction. But we've also been giving these trainings to some of the teachers that are participating in these projects. Ways for them to use 4-H curriculum, which is science-based. A lot of times it's aligned with school education standards. And most of it is very affordable, easy to use, even if you have not been a gardener or even an educator before. And we also have the experience. We've been working in these areas for, well, nearly 100 years, right, Nancy, in 4-H? So we put in the time, and we have the experience, we have the research and the understanding that really can be very helpful to people who are new to this. And then this brings us to you, and this is really the key part about how we can make this happen. You know, we only have a few horticulture educators in the state. We have fewer educators than ever in all of our program areas, but we have volunteers, and you guys are golden. And we wouldn't be able to do a program like this without volunteers, and it makes us be able to be statewide that much more effective. So if you're just joining us on the webinar, welcome. We've just barely gotten started, so get comfortable. You have your sound is off. We've muted you, but if you do have questions, go ahead and type them in on the side. And Nancy's going to watch for those while I'm speaking, and vice versa when she's speaking. So one of the other reasons that Extension was invited to participate in school garden projects in Idaho is because we have a proven track record of making a difference in the sustainability and the success of school gardens in Idaho. Some of you on this call, some of you already working in the schools, you know this, and the gardens that you've been working with are sustainable and successful because, in large part, of your involvement. So I'm going to share just a few with you to get you inspired and also to show off, because these are some gardens that I know about because they happen right in my neighborhood. I can't wait to show off all the good work that you all are going to be doing around the state. That'll be at next year's training. So first of all is the Marsing School Garden. So this is a community garden that's located on school property, and it is tended by the high school and also the elementary school and after-school 4-H programs. So it has become fully integrated into that small community, and as such, each of the partners has had a very important role to play. So this school incorporates not only an edible vegetable garden, but also an Idaho native plants garden, a community garden that's tended by community members, and the produce goes to feed the hungry, and also a native plant and butterfly garden, which I said, and then actually a Blue Star Memorial tribute to the U.S. Armed Forces garden. So part of the reason this garden was so successful is because of the dedication of this Master Gardener volunteer that you see here in the larger picture. And this is Jan Amon. And she worked with the program coordinator at Owyhee County Extension to develop an after-school program using Junior Master Gardener curriculum. And this was so popular, they received one of the school garden grants, and they really made a difference in these kids' lives. And this program went on for a number of years, and I believe the garden is still being tended. So another garden that really caught the eye of the State Board of Department of Education and a few others in our county, including our county commissioners, is this Pat Anderson School Garden. Now you might notice that really tall chain link fence in the back of the garden. Well, that's because this school garden is actually part of the Juvenile Correction Detention Center here in Caldwell and part of their school program. One of their maintenance workers, Craig Anderson, who is actually pictured in the blue shirt in the far back of the photo, he applied for one of the school garden grants with some of the teachers and said, we really need a school garden here. It would be a great way for us to get the kids outdoors. This was just a neglected area of the property. So they started this garden, and they did this in large part with help from one of our Canyon County Master Gardeners, Dale Anderson, shown here with his wife Sheila on the left and Paulette on the right, who is not his wife. She's another one of our advanced Master Gardeners. This is their community garden in Nampa. It's called Trinity Community Gardens, and they formed a nonprofit around this garden. They produce thousands of pounds of food from this garden every year. And so Dale was paired up with Craig and basically showed them what they do, and it was mirrored at the Correction Center garden. Now the Correction Center garden is producing food not only for the students that work there, but also for the hungry in our community. And the students have to actually earn the right to work in the garden by good behavior, and it's been really, really positive in their lives. They do improve their behavior so they have access to the garden. And what's really touched a lot of their lives is the act of giving back to their community and growing food that feeds the hungry. So it's really a success story, and Extension was involved. Our Master Gardeners were really key to making this happen. And that's why all of you have been brought in to be part of this. So that's where we're leading, to the Idaho Master Gardener School Mentor Program, and we're kicking it off this summer. We are a little bit behind, but that's how sometimes things go in the early stages. The money just came in, so now we are ready to get going. But we want you to know how glad we are to have each of you volunteering to be part of this pilot program and to be the very first official school garden mentors. So who you are. So each of you are willing Master Gardener volunteers. You're all in good standing in your counties, and you're each being paired with a recipient of a 2013 Idaho School Garden Grant. So these are all schools that wrote in a grant to the State Department of Education and the Childhood Nutrition Services Program. They each received $2,000 to put a school garden in or to maintain or expand an existing school garden. So this year, though, when the directors of that program put in their grant request to get those grants, they put in money to fund a Master Gardener to be paired with each of those schools. So here are the areas where the gardens are located and where you'll be serving. So we have Kellogg, Coeur d'Alene, Moscow, Troy, Boise, Caldwell, Meridian, Parma, Nampa, Fruitland, American Falls, and Idaho Falls. So we actually received enough applicants that we are able to pair a Master Gardener up with every school, and then except for the Moscow Charter School, which we're still going to try to find somebody for that. And then one of our extension educators in Coeur d'Alene, Mike Bauer, he is going to serve as the unpaid mentor for the Kellogg School. So we're very excited. It really worked out well that we had a Master Gardener for each of these. And I think it was Myrna that I'm going to talk to about being a distance mentor for the center in American Falls, because we don't actually have a Master Gardener in that area. So we'll see how that works too, and that'll be interesting to see if that is effective as the in-person mentors. So what will you do as a mentor? So this is really important, and the way we came up with this program is by looking at the needs of the schools. We looked at how Master Gardeners have been involved with some of these schools in the past here in Idaho, and then we looked at some similar programs around the country. There is a very, very good school garden consultant program through the Master Gardeners in San Diego. There's also a really excellent program in Rhode Island that's getting kicked off, and they've actually agreed to share all of their materials with me so that we can learn from each other. So I'm really excited to see how our program will fare. But what we came up with are some things that you will do and some things that you will not be expected to do. So this is the part where we want you to pay attention, and hopefully this will make you feel more confident about what we've been asked to do. So number one, we ask that every one of you attend this webinar training, either in person or later at a recorded time, on the school garden basics. So those of you that are present right now, you can just go ahead and check that off because you are now attending the webinar. That part has been completed. So the second is we're going to complete a background check on each of you through our county. Some of you have already had this done numerous times as a volunteer. And even if you have, we're going to still do it again so that we have the records here as part of the program. And this is just a way for us to assure the schools and to assure the Department of Education that we are putting volunteers out there that have been screened and approved to work with children. You will never be asked to work one-on-one alone with youth, but this is just a safeguard, and it's something that makes our whole program look more professional and seem more professional. So we appreciate all of you being willing to submit to that. So what else you'll do? Well, your major role as a school garden mentor is going to be to provide technical expertise throughout the growing season. You are going to offer the benefit of your knowledge, your training through the Master Gardener program, your lifelong experience growing fruits and vegetables, and offer that to the participants who have started these gardens, because some of them are newer to gardening. We will also ask that you report on your progress and outcomes, and we will tell you exactly what we're looking for on this, and we will be visiting with you throughout the season and collecting that information from you. This is really important. Those of you that have worked with Extension for a while know just how much we have to document and how much information we have to report back to the decision makers above us so that they know that the resources are being spent appropriately. And I just can't wait to report on the progress and outcomes, because these are the sorts of things that, at least in my county, our county commissioners just eat up. They love to hear about youth being involved in agriculture and horticulture and healthy eating. So this is going to be a fun part. Don't let it scare you. So some of the other things that your duties may include, so this would be working with the project teams that started the gardens to evaluate their sites. You may be asked to help determine some of the basic needs for equipment or tools, or to provide advice on the best kinds of tools or the best place to purchase some of these things. You also might be asked to offer your suggestions on the types and the sizes of beds or plots, soil preparation, which could include soil testing. Many of the schools are interested in composting, so that's something where you could have some significant impact in teaching them about. They also might want your information on weed and pest control, maintaining the garden during the summer, and how to implement season extension. So really, we're looking for your role to be that of advisor, mentor, answer person, and not as, say, the head gardener for the school garden. So a little bit more about the schools themselves and what they're expected to do as grant recipients. So the Department of Education and USDA has determined that these are the most important foods that the children need to learn about during the summer and growing season. These are also linked in with the Idaho preferred crops as being Idaho crops. So we're trying to make that link as well. So the schools have been asked to attempt to grow 8 of these 12 crops throughout the summer and spring, summer, and fall. So this is for your information so that you know, well, why are you trying to grow broccoli? Well, it's on the list. And each site is going to be different, and of course we all know living in Idaho, our climate is extremely different from one area to the next. So we hope that this would be a broad enough array of crops that everybody could at least attempt to grow 8. Also, each month, the schools are going to be doing a taste testing on at least 2 of these crops. And ideally, they would be doing the taste testing from things that they grew in the garden, but that's not always practical. So they were given money to purchase some, hopefully from a local grower, throughout the summer to do those taste testings. And you can see we're already into June, so now they should be trying to grow strawberries, broccoli, and cabbage and doing taste testings on those. If they do have school during the summer, they can try the corn and peppers, and then you can see the late summer and fall crops in there as well. So a few other things you might be asked to do with regard to those crops that are expected to be grown is helping to determine what they should plant and when, and maybe helping them select some varieties that would ripen in the time frame that they have or perform well in your climate, or some of those other reasons that we would choose different crops. You also might be asked to share curriculum and activity ideas. In most of the middle school and high school and even some of the elementary schools, a lot of the educators already have an idea of what they're going to teach from the garden. But some of you are going to be paired up with daycares or child care centers, and they may not have as much access to curriculum for gardening. So I will share with you some of what we would recommend and make sure that you have access to it if you would like to share that with them. You might also be asked to suggest ideas for recruiting and organizing garden volunteers. Those of you that have been in a Master Gardener program for some time probably have an idea of some things that work or don't work with this, so that might be an area of expertise that you could provide the schools as well. And then when at all possible, we would like you to be able to connect the garden project teams with University of Idaho resources. And one of those resources is our outstanding array of curriculum. So some of you have used the Junior Master Gardener curriculum before. You're each going to receive a copy of Health and Nutrition from the Garden. That is that book right there in the center, full of great ideas, things you can do both inside and outside that all relate to vegetable gardening and healthy food choices. In your offices, your county offices near you, you probably will also have access to some of these other 4-H curriculum like Acres of Adventure and some of the other introductory horticulture books. You're certainly welcome to choose those and use them and provide them to the teachers if they're looking for great research-based, high-quality gardening curriculum. And we'll be making all of these available to you in a resource list later that will come out probably through email. So here's the really important part. This is what you will not do as a school garden mentor. We are not offering the schools a free source of labor or a way to drop the ball on their gardens. You will not be asked to perform any physical labor unless you so choose. If you want to participate in some of the day-to-day activities of the garden, that is entirely up to you, and you can do that at your discretion. But that is not what you're being asked to do as a mentor. You will not ever be asked to teach classes with no teacher present. You could certainly assist, and if that's something that really interests you, you could certainly work with the teacher, the instructor, or the volunteer organizing the garden and express that to them, and perhaps they'd give you that opportunity, but that is not an expectation that we have of you. You should not also be asked to raise funds, solicit donations, or contribute your own personal money to the garden. These are all the responsibilities that the garden teams had to assign to themselves before they even applied for the grants. So these are not your responsibilities. The other thing is we were not assigning you to those gardens so that they have someone to maintain them during the summer. This is very important. They have to come up with a way to keep those gardens tended. You could certainly provide ideas, such as installing drip irrigation on timers or having a sensible rotation scheduling for watering or maintenance. But that responsibility to actually do the maintenance will not fall to you. So we hope that that would take away any fears that you had that you were going to be stuck doing all the work in these school gardens as the mentor. And the other thing, we really won't have you using your own vehicles to deliver supplies to the school garden, things like bringing compost in your own truck. Again, if these are things that you decide that you want to do, that is entirely up to you, but it is not part of your position description as a school garden mentor. So that's what we're asking of you and expecting of you, and what we're also not expecting of you. So what will we be offering you in exchange? Well, number one, the opportunity to make a real difference in children's lives. And that's a pretty big thing. But if that's not quite warm and fuzzy enough, or not quite enough of a reward, we also this year are able to offer each of you a $500 travel and supplies stipend. So that's a pretty big bonus. We really never get to pay our master gardeners for what they do, so here's your chance to recoup a little bit of what you all give. In extension, we will also be offering you technical support. So I will be your #1 contact throughout the year, but you will also have access to your own extension educators in your county, and I hope that you will look to them, and they are in full support of this program as well. The other thing we hope to be able to offer is on-site visitation at least once during the growing season. And so that includes even those of you that are in quite a bit of ways from Caldwell. I do have some funding to come out and visit you and see the school, see the garden, and assist you with anything you might need during that time. So what else you'll be getting? You all will be getting some name badges and one of these beautiful University of Idaho work shirts in the blue denim. You could have the option of either a long sleeve or a short sleeve, and it will be embroidered with the Master Gardener logo on it. And so we'll be asking you for your shirt size here pretty soon. And this is just a way for you to identify yourself when you're working in the schools and to promote U of I Extension and Master Gardeners a little bit. We will also be assembling resource kits and teaching kits for you. So these resource kits will have all the information that we're presenting in the webinar. It will have a copy of that health and nutrition from the garden book, some other things that we think are key. Also, each of your packets will include information about your school, including parts of the grant application that we think are relevant for you to know. We'll also have some things in there on the evaluations and that sort of thing, and just some ways for you to get a hold of us. We'll also be putting together some teaching kits because some of you may be asked to do some teaching or may decide that you would like to do that. And so we are going to put together some small teaching kits that would allow you to teach, say, seed starting, composting, and season extension with a few materials. And those teaching kits will actually then stay at the extension office nearest you, but you'll have access to them throughout the year to use. And so we hope to have those resource kits compiled and out to you within the next month. So how do you get connected with your school? Well, you should have all gotten an email yesterday that tells you which school you've been paired with. In the next week, I will be sending introductory emails to each of the school site contacts, and you will be CC'd on that, as will the Department of Education and the extension educator nearest you. I will probably make a phone call also to each school site, since some schools may be not quite in session right now, and I don't know about the availability of email with those teachers. So I will be making contact and connecting you with that school. At that point, then I will expect each of you to follow up with your own email or phone call, introducing yourself to the school garden team and offering your services as a mentor. At this point, every one of the school sites have been told that they have the opportunity to get a mentor, and I think that they are all looking forward to meeting you and having you work with them. Depending on how long they've been doing this and the size and scope of their garden, some of you may be busier than others, and that's part of this first year, is to figure out exactly what this is going to look like in each of the different sites. And so as we do this, I want you to be able to report this to me and let me know when you've made contact and when you've kind of worked out a plan with your school about what you'll be providing over the summer. And that way I can just keep up with that, and I can offer you support, and then we can go ahead and schedule perhaps the visitation later in the summer or early fall. So we talked about evaluation a little bit, and this is just going to be some of the things that I'm going to want to collect from you. I know this chart makes it look very official, but it's really pretty simple. In Extension, we like to collect information that backs up some of our expectations of the kind of impact that we're going to be having. And so we really firmly believe that the school gardens that have been assigned a Master Gardener are going to have more productive vegetable gardens. And so we will just be collecting information from you about if you've been able to grow and harvest 4 out of those 12 vegetables that we emphasized in that chart earlier. So that'll just be me calling or emailing and asking you to give a report on the crops grown and harvested in those gardens. This is not particularly your responsibility to get kids out into the garden, but we would want you to collect the numbers of children that you work with and that are involved in the garden when you're there. And then we also would like to interview you after the close of the project and talk about what the plans are for the subsequent years and see if the Master Gardeners do have an impact on helping those gardens be more sustainable and continue on year after year, because that's really our goal, is to have these become integrated into the schools and have those school garden teams able to do this on their own. We really foresee you mentoring them mostly 1 year, and at that point then they have learned the skills that they need and they can continue on in the garden without your help, and you could move on to a new school. So here's just a little bit more information about the stipend that you'll receive. So this is intended to augment your travel in time. We're not looking at, say, an hourly rate or an exact one-to-one exchange, but this money will hopefully help to cover some of the time, the gas, and the expenses that you might incur as you mentor the schools. We're not expecting you to put it back into the gardens, though some of you may, with your generous spirits, give some of your money back to the schools, but again, that's not what it's intended for. All right, we'll pause for a second. It looks like Mary has a question. Let me pull this up and see if I'm able to see it. It's not typed in. So Mary, if you could type your question in, then we can get to it. All right, give me just a minute here to work through this. Okay, let's see. And Mary's question is, oh, very good. Will there be forms given to us for the evaluations for each step through the season? If that would be helpful to you, yes. Some of it may just be me calling and interviewing you step by step through the garden. But I can actually send you a form so that you can keep track of, say, the students that you work with and the people that you talk to. So great question. Thank you. And we have one more question from Mark. And I have lost my question screen. Okay. And Mark, if you could type that, make sure you type that question in. Here we go. Oh, what is involved in the background check? Well, because I have actually never done these myself, and Nancy has for our 4-H volunteers, I'm going to have her answer that in her presentation. Yeah, so if you could hold that thought for just a minute. I think it's a pretty simple one. I think we can do it without them being in person, right? Well, we'll have her answer that. So thank you, Mark. We'll be sure and cover that. Okay, so getting back to the stipend again, you will receive your stipend probably midsummer after your first report has been made, and so that first report is really just going to be that you've made contact with the school and that you have a timeline and you've had communication with the school garden team. And just to let you know where the funds are coming from, they originated from USDA, coming through the Idaho State Department of Education, as well as some funding that's come through U of I Extension on a small mini grant to fund some of this project. So this is very important to both the State Department of Education and to U of I Extension. They've been in full support of this mentor program, and they're very excited to see what happens. So that brings me to the end of the introduction part, and so now I'm going to turn the time over to Nancy Shelstad to talk for a little bit about 4-H, about working with youth, and some of the other things involved in that.
Okay, I think I have my microphone unmuted. Is that correct?
That's correct. Okay.
Okay, we're going to switch places here real quick. I'll start by answering Mark's question because in my presentation I don't necessarily go into the background checks, but with the 4-H Youth Development volunteers, the background check consists of completing an application. We do a criminal background check with your authorization, and the way we do it in 4-H is it goes through an online service called LexisNexis, and they check criminal records nationally. And then that needs to come back with no records or offenses against vulnerable audiences like youth or the elderly, no violent crimes. Hopefully nobody falls in that category. And then typically we do a phone interview and 3 written references from folks that you give us.
We're not going to do the letters part because they're already master partners. They've already been in our system.
Okay, and Ariel tells me we're not doing the letters part, so probably just the criminal background check. My name is Nancy Shelstad. I'm the 4-H Extension Educator here in Canyon County, the same office that Ariel is in, and I work with youth and volunteers. We certify between 35 and 45 volunteers every year, and typically I give this part of the session in person, so I'm going to be sitting here talking with my hands, so all of you just imagine that's what I'm doing. Working with youth can be very rewarding. You can be, side by side, hands-on. It can be, oh my gosh, what happened to that child? This was up at camp. The child did come home, I promise you. And then it's very rewarding, and you find that kids tend to respect you, and they feel comfortable making faces at you behind your back. So it can be very, very rewarding working with youth. So what I'm going to cover is what is the University of Idaho 4-H Youth Development? How do we use life skills in teaching youth? I'll talk a little bit about experiential learning. I'll talk about child protection and a little bit on risk management. The University of Idaho 4-H Youth Development is the part of extension that works with youth. So what is 4-H? 4-H is for both boys and girls. They are ages 5 to 18. The little guys, the 5 to 7-year-olds, are clover buds, and so obviously their expectations are a little bit different than the older kids. Now most of what you will be working with in the schools will likely be, I'm guessing, 3rd, 4th, 5th grade. So you're probably looking at about 8 to 11, 12-year-olds. Hands-on learning is a key component of 4-H. That's the experiential learning piece. And most of all, it's about youth development. In your case, you'll be working with kids in gardens. And so through gardening, you'll be teaching them many things, mostly along the lines of responsibility, getting along with each other, sharing, all of those types of things that Ariel talked about previously. This is a life skill wheel. It was originally developed by Iowa State University. And these are 35 life skills that have been identified to connect to the head, heart, hands, and health of 4-H. Certainly don't expect you to memorize them, but here's a little information too. You can see all of the different areas and how it connects back to the community and to themselves. If we just take a look at this for a second, community service volunteering up at the top might be one to work on. Marketable skills, maybe they want to go into the green industry when they grow up. They'll learn about teamwork. Ooh, there's a good one. Managing feelings, stress management, problem solving, decision making, service learning, goal setting. There are about 35 of them on this life skills wheel. And these are the things, as you're going through working with the kids, to point out to them that they are learning. Oh, let's share that shovel. Let's share that rake. Can you please hand me the whatever tool? Thank you for watering the plants for me. The pleases and thank yous, the skills that they'll take with them for the rest of their life. These are the things that we truly emphasize in 4-H. Gardening is important. All the things that Ariel talked about are very important, but these are the things that they can take from gardening to robotics, to raising animals, to most anything that they do in their life. So this is the basis of 4-H, and this is what is important to us. And we do this through experiential learning. I prefer the little 3-step model in the center, the do, reflect, apply. The doing is they're out in the garden, they're performing an activity of some sort. Maybe it's augmenting the soil, maybe it's planting the seeds. And then once you do, talk a little bit with them. Do some reflection and sharing. What did you learn? How did that go for you? And then apply. How could you do this differently next time? Or what else can you do with those skills and apply it in a more general setting? If you have time, take the 5 steps. The experience, the share, the process, generalize, apply. I find with especially the younger kids, the preteen, to go through all 5 of those steps is a little daunting. The kids are ready to move on. So just I would stick with the 3 steps, the do, reflect, apply. And that's based on, this is how we learn. The doing is how we learn. And it shows, research has shown that we retain about 10% of what we read, 20% of what we hear, 30% of what we see, 50% of what we see and hear, 70% of what we see, hear, and discuss, 90% of what we see, hear, discuss, and practice. And so you can see on this scale that the actual experience or the actual doing of 4-H projects is where youth will learn the most. If I were to hand somebody a piece of paper or a booklet and says, here's the information you need to go garden, good luck. Some would be able to pick it up and go with it. Others would turn around and look at us like we've just lost our minds. So get those discussions going. Experience the planting, experience the harvesting, experience what the different activities and how things come together. That's where the most learning actually happens. Are there any questions so far? What we'll do is we'll continue to move on, and please make note of any questions, and we'll certainly get back to that. Excuse me. Child protection is a big piece. You'll be working with youth in the community, probably most of which you don't know. In working with youth, reporting child abuse is important. It is a required piece of working with youth. There's lots of different types of abuse that we really don't like to acknowledge happens, that does happen. There's physical abuse, sexual abuse, and neglect is also a form of abuse. And all of these things can and unfortunately does happen in our community. What we do is we have a short video to take a look at. It's just right at 10 minutes. If I can find it on here, we'll bring that up.
We'll make sure that we can hear it. I'll come over there.
Okay. Oh, here's your... Again, thank you for your patience. We're working through doing this for the first time together here. So, okay, there we go.
Welcome to GoToWebinar, Web Events Made Easy.
Are all of you getting here sound?
Children enrich our lives, whether they are members of our families, schools, youth, or religious organizations, or simply our neighbors. Children bring freshness and joy to our days. When we see children, we see smiles and giggles, tumbles and leaps, enchantment and exploration. When adult burdens leave us worried and weary, a child's sudden delight in a butterfly, or a family pet, or a kite can turn our day around. But sometimes when we see children, we see things that concern and disturb us. We see a bruise, a welt, or a burn that wasn't an accident. We see a child smacked hard in a parking lot or locked inside a hot car. We see young children playing in traffic with no one watching out for them. On sweltering days, we see long-sleeved shirts and long pants, a child who has had unexplained injuries before. Sometimes it's not what we see, it's what we hear. A troubled child confides in us that she has a secret she can't tell because someone would be hurt if she did. A withdrawn child tells us that there's nothing to eat in the house and mommy and daddy are gone for long periods of time. Child abuse is more common than most people realize. Every year in Idaho, reports of physical abuse, sexual abuse, and especially neglect number in the thousands. Since 1963, Idaho has had a child abuse reporting law that requires all adults to inform a law enforcement agency or Children and Family Services within 24 hours if they have reason to believe that a child under 18 has been neglected, abused, or abandoned. Failure to report these concerns can actually lead to criminal misdemeanor charges. Regardless of your profession or organization, simply reporting your suspicions to a supervisor isn't enough. You must make sure your supervisor follows through or make the report yourself. We all want to protect children from harm, and in Idaho, it's easy to take the first step. You don't have to be absolutely certain it's child abuse. By contacting your local law enforcement agency, Children and Family Services, or by dialing the Idaho Care Line at 211, you'll be alerting authorities who can assess whether a child needs help. Law enforcement or child protection employees will decide if there is enough cause to respond and how to proceed. When in doubt, err on the side of the child's safety. Children who are abused are rarely only abused once. Simply having a reasonable belief that a child has been abused or neglected is reason enough to call, and it's the law. People who call are not troublemakers. They are people who are worried that a child needs help. You won't get into trouble with the law for calling. Reports made in good faith and without malice are immune from civil liability. Although no one wants to see a child harmed, people are sometimes hesitant to call. I know the parents, it's really awkward. I'm just afraid that involving the police or social workers could make the situation even worse.
What if they get even more angry or abusive after I call? That's why I don't report it. I'd hate to be responsible for a family being torn apart.
Whatever the reason, children are never protected by silence. Calling is the first step to protecting children and to helping families. If Child Protection Services determines the child faces current and ongoing threats to their safety, social workers develop a safety plan with the family to allow the child to stay home. But if the child's safety cannot be ensured through that safety plan, the child may be removed from the home by law enforcement or the court. For a time, the child may stay with relatives or in a foster home. When children must be removed from their home, Children and Family Services again works with the family to develop a plan toward the child's safe return home. How do you know when you should call? Some children spend a few hours at home alone after school because their parents have to work. Children from families with less money often can't dress as well as children from families with more money. And all children get bumps and bruises in the rough and tumble of play. Care enough to call if a child is young and left alone, lives in a house with health or safety hazards, has no home or emergency shelter, has nothing to eat, and looks hungry and underweight. Call if the child has injuries such as bruises, welts, cuts, bite marks, or broken bones with no appropriate explanation. Has burns or bruises that look like the object used to inflict them. Has a pattern of repeated injuries. Has disclosed that he or she has been hurt by an adult. Or wears clothing that is too warm for the season and that may be concealing injuries to arms or legs. Also call when you have reason to believe that children are being used in a sexual way. For example, when they have told you that they have been touched in a private place. They have to play games they don't like. They have to keep something a secret. Someone will be hurt if they tell the secret. When you call, you'll be asked some specific information. You may not be able to answer all of the questions. That's okay. Just supply the information that you have, which may include the child's name and family's name, address, and phone number, the child's current location, and whether he or she is in immediate danger, the license plate number of the car the child is in, a description of any injury to the child and when and where the incident occurred, names of other people who may have information, why you have concerns about the child's safety, additional information about the child, family, or caregivers that may be helpful, your name, address, phone number, and relationship to the child, unless you have chosen to make an anonymous report. If you give your name, every reasonable effort will be made to maintain your confidentiality, although the family can sometimes figure out who called. Other people may have called before you, but your call may be the missing piece in the puzzle that lets the child get the help he or she needs. Sometimes calls are made by adults who observe that a child may be in danger. At other times, an abused child may approach you. If a child tells you that he is being harmed, listen attentively. If what he says gives you reason to suspect child abuse, reassure him that what he has told you is so important that you're going to contact someone else who will help him. If he only gives you a hint, for example, if he simply says, "Daddy hurt me," ask him to tell you more about that. If he says he can't tell you, ask him what would happen if he did. Likewise, if a child doesn't come to you first but has physical injuries or marks that trigger your concern, you might say to the child, "Tell me how you got that bruise." In neither case should you try to pry details out of a distressed or evasive child. Just report your concerns to law enforcement or Children and Family Services. They have been trained to talk to children about these issues. If you ask too many questions, you can make their job harder and you may even interfere with the interviewing process. As soon as you have reason enough to suspect child abuse, stop asking questions and start calling. Child abuse won't disappear just because we ignore it. It is a difficult and disturbing topic. We all wish we would never see it, but unfortunately, too many of us will. Children who are suffering abuse or neglect depend on adults to bring these dangers into focus. Please, care enough to call.
Okay. Sorry. Okay. I can hope that they were able to get it even with the screen. All right, you're on. Okay, I hope all of you were able to.
Okay, I hope all of you were able to see that. And we had echoes going on all over there for a second.
Okay, hold on. Turn the speakers off. Oh, there we go.
Okay, is everybody back on? Okay, I think we're back on. I also wanted to show you a couple of documents that go along with this video, and I will work with Ariel to get these sent out to you at the conclusion of the webinar or whenever the next time is. She sends out a few things. These are also available out online. It basically talks about, obviously this last one you can see there's the Idaho Care Line phone number. It also talks about how to report child abuse, what your responsibilities are. It also talks about that there's a good question on the top of this next one. Can you get in legal trouble for calling? Any reports made of child abuse or neglect made in good faith and without malice are immune to any type of civil liability. Obviously, if you are calling out of malice or kind of to get back at somebody, yes, you can get in trouble with that. If you're calling out of good faith, no, you cannot. And so there's a couple of questions. Let's get back to, here we are. There we go. Just a couple of discussion points. And I don't know if we can open everybody's mic here to get some interaction, but we're going to try it. If we get feedback, we'll just mute everybody again and move on and just kind of, I'll just talk for a minute. You may come across many situations that you're just not quite sure what to do. So what do? Do you report immediately? Do you just kind of sit back and find out more? Do you do nothing? So here are some of the situations that could come up. Say a child continually comes to your meetings asking for food. Okay, I'm unmuted again. There we go. Okay, we're not going to try the discussion piece again. So we'll just kind of go on and just talk about these things. If you have a child that is constantly asking for food at your meetings, is that something to be concerned about? Should that be reported right away? Do you do nothing about it? Do you find out more? A couple of things to think about. It's not terribly uncommon for a child to always ask for food, right? But if you look at that child and they're malnourished, their skin tone is off, they're not able to concentrate. If there are other symptoms to go along with that, maybe. But it's not uncommon for a child to always be asking for food, especially if you're talking about teenagers. A normally outgoing child is extremely quiet and upset. Is that something to be concerned about? Again, what are some of the other surrounding things? Maybe the child just got in trouble at home for something the night before and they're upset about it. Is it a temporary thing? Is it a complete 180 in how that child is normally acting? Are there other symptoms that go with that? So some of these things you might think right away, yes, you need to report it, but think about the other circumstances too. A child is unwilling to go home with a parent. Can that be a sign? Sure, it can be a sign. Is it always a sign that something not so good is going on at home? Not really. Maybe that child is having just a ton of fun with you and with the garden or at school. Maybe they don't want to leave their friends. the other side of it is maybe there is something inappropriate going on at home. So you kind of have to think about that. Can you stop a child from going home with their parent? No, that's called kidnapping. You cannot do that. Although if the child is going home with their parent and you sense that something is absolutely not right, call the authorities, call the helpline, call the 211, call 911, depending on how urgent the situation seems. But protect yourself along the way too. So what if you see unexplained evidence of physical trauma? And that can be a tricky one sometimes. Again, some kids can play really hard and get bruises and bumps, and they have no idea where they came from. On the other hand, there could be some physical trauma of some sort, a bruise, a bump, something like that, that they can't explain or at least won't explain. One of the keys is, does that bruise or mark look like the object that may have caused it? That many times is a cause for concern. So again, what are the other signs around that? We certainly don't want to be reporting things that we shouldn't, but on the other hand, our kids' safety is pretty important too. So all of those things, you know, kind of look at what the other circumstances are around it. Look out for yourself as well. There we go. Protect yourself as well. Open doors, open spaces. Try not to be one-on-one with the kids. That is not a good idea. It sounds like there will be a teacher with you most of the time. With our 4-H volunteers, there isn't. It's up to them. They are the ones that have the relationships with the youth. Open doors, open spaces. Look out for if you are behind a building and you suddenly find yourself back at the garden and there's one child with you. Be aware of that. Not that that means anything, but that kind of opens yourself up to as well, you know, the child could, you know, well, Miss Nelson and I went behind the building and we looked at the garden, and think about what that may sound like to the parents. So open doors, open spaces. Adult-youth ratios, do whatever you can to not be one-on-one with a child. It's just not a good idea. Gender relations, just as it sounds. Ladies, don't find yourself alone with a young man. Men, don't find yourself alone with a young lady. While nothing may be going on, it's the appearance that sometimes can come back. Now, hugs and physical touch is something that can be kind of tough. Kids need hugs. That's my personal opinion. However, again, we need to be very careful. Not all kid needs or wants a hug. As adults, sometimes we need or want hugs. We want to reach out. If it does seem to be appropriate or the child initiates it, be sure it's a side-to-side hug, not front-to-front. So right shoulder to left shoulder, arm around their shoulders. Keep the touching to just arms, maybe top of their shoulders. Just be very, very cautious. Unfortunately, that's the society we live in. So again, please speak up with any questions as we go along. The other thing that Ariel asked if I would talk about just a little bit is risk and risk management, and I am going to lighten up on this topic just a little bit more than what I initially was going to talk about. In listening to Ariel, it sounds like you are not necessarily the one organizing the events. You are there to help and to mentor, but still I think it is good to be aware of some of these things. There are basically 4 different things that are at risk when you're working in the University of Idaho Extension programs. Obviously the people, the participants, the youth, you as a volunteer, the teachers that you work with, the extension educators and coordinators that you work with, obviously the property, the school property, whether it's the outside garden or the buildings. Property could also include the tools that you use. Think about what the risks are with the tools that you use with the youth. In many programs, income can be at risk. Again, I understand you're not actually working with the income, but Ariel is, and she needs to see that the grant money is appropriately spent. So that risk is all on Ariel. So everyone send her a thank you note when we're done here. She's taking that on. The goodwill. In other words, the name University of Idaho Extension, your name as a certified master gardener, the name of the school, the name of the program, the name of the grant. All of that has goodwill, has an excellent reputation in the state, and we want to keep it that way. So all of these things can potentially be at risk. So what do? There's 4 different ways of controlling risk. The first is avoidance. Okay, you want to avoid it? Just cancel the program. Don't have it. Many times that is not an option. Sometime when it could be an option, say you have a meeting planned, you're going outside, you're going to be in the garden, you look at the weather forecast. There's severe storm warnings. Okay, maybe that's a time to just totally avoid it, cancel the meeting. Another way you could work with that is to modify the program. Okay, instead of meeting outside today, we're going to meet in the gymnasium, and we're going to do ABC instead of XYZ outside. So you can modify your programs in order to control some of the risks that could happen. Transferring risk is another way of handling it. The best example that I can come up with, we use this all the time in the 4-H program, is, for example, when we take kids up to camp. If you're familiar with Idaho, our camp is just above Donley on Cascade Lake. I'm in Caldwell and in the Boise area programming to get kids up there. The transportation, we transfer the risk of that road to a bus company. We hire a professional to do it. It is now their responsibility and their risk to get the kids to camp. It's not mine. I'm not going to pile 6 kids in my car and drive up there. They're all getting on the bus. Or we can retain the risk. And that means we have looked at the situation, we know what the risks are, and we're willing to accept that because we feel that we can control what's happening, what's going on, and we can accept that. So think about your programming. A few things to think about in the garden that I can think of off the top of my head might be the tools. One way to modify risk, watch where the tools are. Are they always all in one place? Are they in a place where a child could step on an upturned rake and the handle comes up and whacks them in the head? Not a good deal. So look at modifying the risk, changing things around a little bit so that it's safe. Maybe think about how your garden hose is laid out. Is it coiled up? Is it put away so no one can trip on it? Those types of things. So what if there is an accident? And again, we might talk about this a little bit and kind of back off a little bit. With my 4-H volunteers, they're there. They're the go-to person on site. Again, it sounds like you'll have a teacher there who would be your go-to person. Obviously, if someone is physically injured, the first priority is to get them first aid or call for help, whatever needs to happen there. Get the child or the volunteer or the adult taken care of. Their physical safety is very, very important. Property damage, if you're going by, you're checking on the garden at the school, and you find, oh my goodness, someone left the water on and it's flooding all over the place. Obviously, correct the situation and report it. And at your individual schools, I would imagine that there will be different ways of reporting it. If there are any severe accidents or incidences, notify your supervisor, which I'm assuming in this case would be Ariel. If something's going on that you just kind of go, whoa, that's something could come of this, let Ariel know right away. Whether there would be a written report involved or not, she'll work with you on that. In the 4-H program, if someone is injured, there is a very short written report that we do request from all of our volunteers. So that could very definitely be a possibility. So again, I would like to ask if there are any questions. As you can tell from my example pictures, camp is one of my things that I have a lot of passion for, and I thoroughly enjoy working with camp counselors. This was a group of counselors. I just got back from counselor retreat yesterday. Had a ton of fun. So in your experience can be like this too. You can be working with a lot of kids and have a ton of fun. So I welcome any questions. If you would like to contact me another time on any questions on working with youth, I'd be more than happy to respond to those questions and work with Ariel or you to help you feel super comfortable working with kids. And I am finished. All right, thank you so much, Nancy. That was wonderful. And
Can you hear me now? Okay. Well, in case some of you couldn't hear me either, I apologize. I was thanking you all for being on the webinar and putting up with any technical difficulties, so we might have just had one. We're learning how to do this. So anyway, we're going to finish up today. Our last section is going to be talking about some ideas for successful school gardens. And like I was saying, if you were hearing me, this is the gardening part for you gardeners out there. So I wanted to start by talking to you a little bit about the school garden teams who applied for their grants so that you have an idea of who you're working with. And I will give you more information about each of your school sites here in the next couple days. First of all, these school garden teams really impressed me with their passion and their commitment and their eagerness to be part of these school garden projects. They had really well thought out applications. They were very excited and they had some great ideas. So many, but not all, are somewhat experienced. Some of these gardens are in their second or third year, and so they're not starting from scratch, which I think is going to be really great. You guys can really take their gardens to the next level. They've really put together some great teams. Most of them have teachers, administrators, parent volunteers on board as part of their team. So you as the master gardener will slide in and be a really important part of that team. Many of them have already established some community partnerships, so they may have already made contact with a local nursery or a landscape company or something like that. So in some cases they have some muscle already going, and really what they need is the finesse and the experience and the resources that you guys bring as master gardeners. So they're well on their way, but they still need you, and they're still very excited to have you, and I think there's going to be lots of ways that you can participate and contribute to their projects. So some of the things that they were most interested in and maybe didn't have as much experience or education in were raised beds and container gardening, soil preparation, irrigation, and composting. Quite a few were interested in fruit trees and berries. Almost all of them, especially those who were gardening outside of the Treasure Valley, had a very big interest in season extension. And they were also interested in the integration of the garden and teaching, and they had some concern about harvest, handling, and food safety. So these are all the things that I think that those of you that are mentoring can really help them to understand. And you can help by using the teaching kits that will be on their way to you that will have information on season extension, seed starting, maybe drip irrigation, some things that you can help to use to teach the participants about these topics. You can also continue to update yourself on the basics. Those of you that have been gardening for some time, that this is probably something that you already know. And then make sure that you're up to date with Extension resources, that you know about the websites and the publications that we have and how to use them and share them with others. And then don't be afraid to ask for help. Other Master Gardeners in your county Extension educator, me, don't be afraid to reach out. So in order to help you a little bit, I'm going to be sending each of you a copy of these 3 books. First of all, Planning an Idaho Vegetable Garden, Harvesting and Storing Fresh Garden Vegetables, and Composting at Home. So you will all get a copy of these books. And the school garden teams have also received their copies. So if you tell them, you know, it's just like in the Composting at Home book on page 36, they can go home and look at that resource, or they might have it there at the site. So you'll all get hard copies of those. So if you wanted to share those books with anyone else, or someone's curious about where they can order their own copy, you can direct them to the U of I Extension Publication Catalog, and lots more information on this website beyond those 3 books. So we hope that you are familiar with that, know how to use it, and can give people the information so that they can use this resource as well. Almost all of our gardening publications are now available online for free to view, including the Master Gardener Handbook. So don't forget about that important resource also. And those of you that may have been out of the program for a little while, the Master Gardener chapter on vegetable culture has just been rewritten, so you might want to check that out. It's new and improved. Then we've also continued to maintain and update our Idaho Landscapes and Gardens website, and this is a really great one-stop shop for all kinds of gardening information, and you would probably go to the fruits, vegetables, and herbs section first. And the other page to keep in mind is the insects, diseases, and weeds, of course. And there's the website address for that. And really, if you just go into Google and you type in Idaho Gardens Extension, this is the first thing that comes up. If you're interested in more about 4-H, or questions come up as you're working with youth and they want to know, where did you get that great curriculum and what do the 4-H's mean, then you can always go to our University of Idaho Extension 4-H website. Lots and lots of great information, how to buy products, curriculum, link to the educators near you, all of that are there on that page. And that's just uidaho.edu/extension/4-H. So let's talk about getting started. Like I said, most of the garden sites have already begun their work for the season, or their gardens have been in the ground and going for a couple of years. But here are some things to think about for those that may still be getting started or having some troubles as they've been getting started. Number one, we're going to want to help them evaluate their garden site and make sure that everything is as it should be and in the right spot. Now would be a good time to make changes or adjustments, or talk about doing those later in the fall. We'll want to look for and identify potential problems to prevent or treat, and then help them make plans to extend their season. So number one, checking on the garden location. And again, this should be information that you all have known for a long time, but we're just going to refresh in case it's been a little bit. And again, some of these beginners, they may not know some of these basics. Number one, definitely have them avoid any low-lying or windy areas, especially those that are trying to put in fruit trees. Remember that the minimum amount of sunlight for your vegetable plants is between 8 to 10 hours. If they only get about 5 or 6 hours in the site that they've set aside for a garden, let them know that they can probably grow greens and herbs there fairly well, maybe even strawberries, but any crop that's going to flower or fruit is going to need that 8 to 10 hours. It's kind of a non-negotiable. A few more considerations when we're talking about the location of the garden. Where is their water? How is the garden going to be watered? Is it going to be accessible? Is the location of the garden going to be safe? Do the children have to cross a busy highway to get to the garden site? If so, is there any way to locate the garden closer to the school? In a new garden site, you always want to be aware that there might be the risk of contaminants, especially in a new school. Find out what was in that plot of land before the school was built. Protection can take on a number of different meanings depending on where you are in the state. It might mean protecting the garden against deer. It might be protecting the garden against vandals. If you live in eastern Idaho, it might be protecting the garden against wind. So think about that. And then also the convenience. Not only is the garden safe to access, but is it convenient to access? And so here's a picture from the McCain Middle School. This is a former grant site a couple years ago, and you can see the garden is located right next to the school. So for safety and access and protection, it's probably a pretty good location. But keep in mind, as gardeners, we also have to think about some of those other things. And it turned out that this was also a very low-lying area, and they gardened in-ground. They didn't use raised beds. And so when the spring rains came, it made the garden inaccessible for several weeks, up to a couple months, because it was flooded out. So keep some of those things in mind, and that might be where some of your advice and experience gardening in the community where you're going to be mentoring can really be a benefit. So some of the different garden styles. Of course, we have everything available to us: rows, hills, beds, or boxes. What you choose and what the schools choose is really going to depend on what they have experience with, what's going to work for the space, and what some of their production goals are going to be. So if they have unlimited space and unlimited labor and unlimited sunshine, then a traditional garden like this might be a great option, especially if they wanted to grow a lot of food for the school or to give away or to sell. However, what tends to be most practical for a school garden are these raised beds. And they can come in any shape and size and lots of different materials. This is a really great design made out of inexpensive fir. It's, like I said, it's very inexpensive, but it's very long-lasting. And these beds have been equipped with drip irrigation and also PVC that can accommodate hoops for season extension. So plastic or fabric can be stretched across these beds, and they can be turned into mini greenhouses. Raised beds can also just be as simple as soil mounded up in a hill. Anything you can do to warm that soil faster and increase drainage is going to help make that garden more successful. And again, the materials can be as varied as lumber, even up to cinder blocks. The only things we would want to avoid are older pressure-treated lumbers that may have contaminants, and things like railroad ties that are still oozing the creosote and some of those chemicals. I would definitely stay away from those. But most modern lumber, the modern recycled lumber and things like Trex board can work really well for raised beds. Even something like straw we've seen used as a raised bed, and this would be nice too. It would be a little accessible. You wouldn't have to bend over as much, and your mulch is built right in. So here's a school in Bruno, and you can see they had the amount of space to do both. So they have the raised boxes here, and then they also have in-ground growing. And I think that Meridian is similar to this. They're going to grow melons or pumpkins or corn in an area where they can access it with a rototiller, and then they're also doing boxes so the kids can get a little bit more up close and personal and grow some crops in the boxes. So each site is going to be different, and you can use your own expertise and experience to help them make those decisions. So this is some things that we've shared with the groups also, is that when you're designing raised beds, they really seem to be more effective if you can keep them under 4 feet. And that is so that you can reach across them without ever having to step into the boxes. This is really important if you're trying to maintain that soil quality and that good drainage. You don't want to have to ever stand in the boxes. If schools want to have beds that are accessible to wheelchairs, then they want to be at least 2 feet high. And not all the beds need to be accessible, but I think that it's very important that at least some of them should be, so that every student in the school has the opportunity to use the beds. And I mentioned this just a minute ago, but be sure to avoid old salvaged wood that might have lead paint, any kind of old pressure-treated wood, or those oozing railroad ties. And we found that fir is a quite affordable, long-lasting choice. Most of the schools have already started to assemble their beds, but if they haven't and they're looking for plans, extension.org has some very nice plans from extension offices around the country. So talking a little bit about intensive gardening, these are small space gardens. They are going to want to pack a lot in here. They're going to want to have maximum yield out of minimum space. And so this is something I think we teach in Master Gardener classes around the state, and something that you should be quite familiar with on how to be successful with an intensive garden. And so this is mainly using that closer spacing. You're not having a lot of space that is wasted to paths, trying to grow vertically whenever you can. But remember, when you're growing more crops in a small space, they are probably going to need more water and a little bit more fertility and have to be managed a bit more intensively to grow well. But it's really incredible what you can grow in a small space. Here's a picture from the Trinity Community Gardens, and you can see these beds are about 12 feet by about 3 feet, and they're put end to end, and hundreds of pounds of vegetables from each of these beds. And you can see they're very shallow, so there's nothing on the bottom of them. The native soil eventually mixes with the nice rich topsoil that they've added to the top, and that way you've got plenty of rooting depth for those vegetables. And here are some kids picking some beets, and the other two people are looking at some broccoli seedlings. And here's that same garden later in the season when they've installed trellising. So see, even in a narrow bed like this, you can still grow squash and melons and cucumbers by simply growing them up. And this can be a really fun experiment for kids too. And we can make these plans available to you if you're interested. And there's just a picture of that melon growing right on that trellis netting. So many of the sites are interested in container gardening, and that's wonderful because it really can be a great solution if they have very difficult sites or very difficult climates. Some of you might be gardening in a climate where you really don't have a long enough growing season to successfully do things like tomatoes and peppers. So if you have a container, that container can come inside and can come outside. It could move into a greenhouse. This is also a great way for individuals to have their own gardens, and I'll show you a picture in a minute. If you're teaching about container gardening, make sure that you mention that light-colored containers are a really good way to go. They don't build up as much heat, the roots stay a little bit cooler, and overall it's a good thing. Definitely use a fertile potting mix. You might even mix some compost into there just so that there's good drainage and you're feeding those plants because they can't get out of that container and access nutrients in another way. And be very choosy about the varieties that you put in containers. Look for things like dwarf or patio or bush in the name of the vegetable variety. These are typically going to stay smaller and form better in those constrained environments. And keep in mind that with containers, we usually have to water every day, at least once a day, especially in the summer heat. So here are some fun ideas. This is an actual bucket garden kit that you can purchase, but how simple would that be to make? You do want to use food grade or clean buckets, never anything that has had chemicals in it, and you definitely want to drill drainage holes in there so that you get drainage. Being creative about containers too. Here's a way to create an accessible garden using horse troughs. Filled with topsoil, and you could actually do a false bottom in there if you didn't want to have that much soil. That would probably not drain very well if that whole thing was topsoil. And then here's an idea if you wanted every child at the school to have their own garden, everybody could have a bucket, and they could move their buckets out during the day and move them back in if there was frost protected. So a little bit about soil. You should all have gone through this in your Master Gardener class and be well aware of this for a long time, but we know that good soil, we want it to be well draining, rich in organic matter, and teeming with life. And unfortunately, a lot of these school sites will not be naturally blessed with that kind of soil. So if you are going to be making containers or raised beds, then you definitely want to make your own soil, and a good combination would be topsoil, maybe a little peat moss, especially if you live in an alkaline area, but definitely compost and topsoil. And if you live in a part of the state where the most compost that's available to you is dairy compost or manure compost, you want to use a lot less of that, whereas those of you in the northern part of the state where you have access to a lot of forest compost, you could use up to 1/3 of your bed mix could be compost. But I would keep that number maybe to 1/8 if you only have access to the dairy manures. So we all know about soil testing through Master Gardener class. If they suspect that there might be any contaminants or there's never been anything grown there in that site before, it would be worth it to use some of their budget money to test the soil. And you can either do that through your local extension office, or if you live in a community that has a soil testing lab like we do down here in Parma, you can go through them. And a little bit about water. We all know that most of our vegetables need between 1 to 2 inches of water per week, and we would love it if we could provide this with drip, but it's not always practical. A lot of these sites are interested in drip, and some of them, they can use a certain portion of their $2,000 to install a drip system, so that might be something that you can help them research and install. And keep in mind that timers can be a real lifesaver, especially when we're talking about watering the gardens over the summer when they don't have somebody on staff that's going to be there all the time. A way to set it and forget it and come back and check it later can really help out. So remember, we looked at this sheet before, and this is just a reminder. These are the 12 crops that we are encouraging each site to grow, and they have to attempt to grow at least 8 of them. So we'll be sending you information on each of these. If there's something you haven't grown before, you can ask us about it, but I think that probably most of you have grown all of these things. Depending on where you live, we do break our crops into cool weather and warm weather crops, and this should be just review for most of you, and hopefully you've already got your gardens in already now that we're heading into June. But we probably moved past the time for some of the cool weather crops, except maybe some of you up in Boundary County, Corrigan area, and actually over in Idaho Falls too, you may still have just frosted. But we're going to wait until at least now and a little bit later to plant those warm weather crops. And so that's why I feel like even though we're getting a slower start, you're still going to be able to help these sites quite a bit, because we're just now into the warm weather crop season for a lot of the areas where these school gardens are located. And so just a quick review of our planting calendar. This is going to be different for each site depending on where they are. But remember, before the last frost in spring, we can plant a lot of our cool season root vegetables, some of our brassicas, the things like the cabbages and kales, potatoes, onions, carrots, beets, and that sort of thing. But we have to wait until after the last frost if we're going to plant things like tomatoes and melons and beans unprotected out in the garden. And something really exciting is that Master Gardeners can really teach these schools how to use season extension and how to get around some of these rules. We can also encourage them to use succession planting, so replanting a crop a number of times throughout the season to prolong that harvest. And then we could also think about doing a late summer, early fall garden so that the kids have more access to the garden during the times when they're actually in school. And up to and even right after the first fall frost, we can still plant things like garlic and onions and shallots. So some of these schools may feel like they live in a place with endless winter, and that is very possible. You know, I know even up in Valley County here in around McCall, on a good year they'd have a 60-day growing season, whereas in the Treasure Valley we have about a 150-day growing season. And I know that it varies widely from each of the corners of the state. But don't let that stop you, and don't let that stop your gardens from really pushing those limits and seeing how much they can get out of a season. And so we do that with season extension. And I think season extension is going to be especially important for a school garden because they may not have people around during the major portion when those of us that garden would be growing things. So they need spring gardens and fall gardens and want to know how to do things that way. So just a few ideas, things that you should make sure that you're familiar with and can teach them about. Low tunnels, using plastic or floating row cover to create mini greenhouses. And up in this top left photo, it can just be laid right over plants, or it can be suspended over hoops. And you might think about building structures like a cold frame. You could have a cold frame per classroom, or you could have a cold frame per grade. And a really nice place to look for some of this is johnnyseeds.com. And I'll make sure that in your resource kits you have lots of information on season extension. Just really quick talking about fruit trees, the schools that want to put in fruit. It's very important that if they want these trees to be successful over a long period of time, they want to choose a site that's going to be just for fruit. They're going to want to amend the entire area prior to planting and not just the individual planting holes. And if they're going to do berries, and that includes strawberries and even raspberries, they might want to mound amended soil or create a raised bed particularly for those berries. anywhere in the state where we have heavy clay soils, we have problems with root rots and other disorders with these berries. So amending the soil, making sure that it's weed-free before we get planting is going to go a long way. So in some parts of the state, you might actually be okay growing blueberries, and I'm thinking about the northern Idaho gardeners. But here in southwest Idaho, if they want to grow blueberries, really try to steer them towards growing them in a container and not directly in the ground because of our pH issues that you're all quite aware of if you garden down here. And that's just to show lovely, lovely apples. Everyone wants an apple tree, though those of you that have grown apples know how much work they can be to keep the worms away and to treat some of the other issues. So you might want to steer them towards things like plums that have very few problems, don't need a lot of pruning, and not a lot of insect or disease issues. And if they live in southern Idaho, you might also want to teach them about growing grapes, which can be a wonderful crop, very easy to grow, and would be putting on fruit right as kids come back to school. Hey, so just a quick reminder that we want to make sure that everyone learns about integrated pest management, even if they don't call it that. We just wanted them to use a really wide approach to managing pests. Number one, keeping those gardens healthy and happy. Well cared for plants are much more resistant to insects and disease. We want to be out there a lot inspecting for signs and symptoms, and this is where kids can be invaluable in the garden because they see things that adults never would. They're down, they're close to that level, their eyes are better, they're just really good at this. One of the things that I hope that you'll help with as a master gardener is really helping them to correctly identify potential problems. Those of you that have worked in plant clinics in your county offices or have been involved in the program for a long time know how important it is to correctly identify a problem before you take action. Just this past week, we had a lot of people bringing in ladybug larvae, wondering what this horrible pest was, how to kill it, and it was a real teaching moment for us that hopefully you can have as you're working with the schools too. If at all possible, if there is a problem, try to treat the cause and not the symptom. And really look to make those cultural and biological methods work first. These are school gardens. We're dealing with children. It would really be nice not to have to use any chemicals if at all possible. And since you're growing these gardens for learning, then pest problems are just another learning experience. Don't feel like these have to be perfectly maintained and meticulous gardens. Because I think all of us would rather not use chemicals around the youth. And that would include even the people doing the management of the school gardens and the grounds around the school garden. Make sure that they're aware of what you're growing in the garden and use anything they're going to spray with really extreme caution. And here's just a picture of why kids are so good at looking for pests. They're right down there at that level. And just last thing, and my master gardeners are probably sick of hearing this, but about 95% of our garden problems are brought on by human blights, so things that we do in the garden to cause problems. And these are the kinds of things, especially with new gardens and new gardeners, and potentially the random sort of way that these gardens might be cared for. I'm hoping that they're all going to be maintained beautifully through the summer, but here's something that might possibly happen. Overwatering and underwatering both cause lots of problems, as does not enough light, nutrient issues, so this can be nutrient deficiencies or more likely nutrient toxicities when we think, oh, if a little manure is great, a lot of manure is even better. We want to avoid things like that. And we want to avoid any potential chemical damage, whether it's through sprays inadvertently or on purpose. Poor soil conditions can lead to a lot of problems with plants, whether that's, say, putting blueberries in a high pH soil or planting things that need a lot of drainage like strawberries in a really heavy sticky clay and overwatering. These will cause problems. Weather-related injury, wind, frost, hail, this can all cause damage on your vegetables and fruits. Some of that can't be predicted or prevented, but we can predict and prevent injury by tools, trampling, not using just proper caution in the garden, and that's where keeping kids out of the raised boxes and teaching them to respect those plants is going to come in handy. So I said you're all going to receive that composting book, and a lot of the sites are interested in starting composting, so There are lots of different ways to do it, and it's all going to depend on the goals, the amount of waste being generated, and the kind of budget they have for equipment. So anything from a simple wire and wood containment system like this up to the more expensive bins and tumblers, which most of our master gardeners have found aren't nearly as effective as a simple open air bin. So just really quick, keep in mind when we're talking about compost, we want to have about 2 parts of brown to 1 part of green. We don't want to add any meat, fats, or pet animal waste. And we want to water, stir, and repeat, and then use it when it's done. And we've talked to the schools about safety issues with compost, about what not to put in it, and how to proceed. So they should be ready for that. So we're hoping that everything is going to go right, but sometimes things just go wrong. And this is a picture of a watermelon, actual size. It was actually by my father-in-law, who had to send me this picture so that I could make fun of him and then offer condolences. But keep in mind that these are school gardens and these are teaching gardens, and so this is a great way to learn. We all learn in our gardens from the inevitable failures, and they're going to happen in the school garden sites as well. And if that's your biggest problem, you're doing okay. And when it all goes right, we can just feel like we're the king of the world. We can grow enormous cabbages and vegetables and win blue ribbons at the fair. But that's, again, not what it's all about. It's all about working with the youth. And this was a message from one of the principals of a school that had a garden a few years ago. And he said, above all, have fun. This is a great opportunity to have a positive experience with your students. And that's really what it's all about. It's about introducing them to the joy of gardening and the joys of eating fresh produce and connecting with nature. And it's about all of you being able to give back to your communities in this way. If you're interested in some of the photos that I've shown, there's a wonderful publication on the State Department of Education's website that highlights some of the schools that have received grants in the past, and this is a great way to learn from what they've done and integrate that into the plans that you're going to work on with your schools. And here's that website, and we will send you all of this in a document as well so that you can link to it whenever you want. But we're hoping that if they do another version of this, then your schools and your gardens might be in there soon. And so here's that site again if you wanted to find out more about the school garden program in Idaho and everything that's been going into that. We will also be finishing up this webinar. We'll record it and we will post it online for you to view, and I will let you know where that's going to be posted so you can watch it over and over and over again because it's been so much fun, right? But we also want you to keep in touch with your extension office locally and with me as we move into this process. We want to be there with you and for you every step of the way. So, and this is kind of what I want to leave you with, is really I want you to have fun working with these teachers, with these amazing schools, and with these kids who are really our next generation of gardeners. And there's my email address. You all have it because you've been getting emails from me, but if you wanted to make sure that you had it again, there it is. So we'll give you a couple minutes if there are any more outstanding questions. You can also send questions to me via email or to Nancy, and we really look forward to working with you on these projects. And I'm seeing if there are any questions. I think these were questions back when we were started and we didn't have the sound. Yeah, I think we're back on now. So thank you all for being so patient with us on our first ever webinar. And if you have any questions, let us know. And we'll be in contact with you in the next few days with the information about the schools that you've been paired with.
And this is Nancy. I just wanted to say thank you as well. Volunteers are very precious to getting programming done in Extension, and thank you very much for stepping up to do this.
All right, thank you all, and happy gardening.